Hey fifth graders, and welcome back to another The Math Show with Miss Condry. Hooray! All right, don't forget those norms. Remember to make sure that you're being respectful and having a positive attitude. Remember to keep trying even when it's hard, and to remember that important word yet. You might not know it yet, but you will at some point. All right. Hopefully you've already watched the first video. The first video is really important that I posted for this week because it talks about the two generalizations we need to be able to multiply and divide with decimals. So today's learning target that we're going to do, it's in the packet Unit 7, Module 3, and it's this very last page here, page 290. I'm going to have you kind of ignore this piece because this is going to be really hard to do without some resources that we have in the classroom. So I'm going to show you a different way that you can use an array, which is what they're kind of guiding you to solve the problem here on this page. But we'll do a different one so you can practice using the real one. So I can multiply decimals using an array. This is really important, and it's nice because you're already comfortable with arrays. So what I'm going to do is we're just going to go through as a problem that's similar. So on this worksheet, you're going to be asked to look at a decimal multiplication problem and think about finding the area of something that has decimal numbers in it. Okay, so I just came up with a sample problem. I'd like to cover up the bottom portion. We'll just do parts at a time. So this says 2 25 times 32 hundredths. Now, I know that this number is a little over 2, and this number is almost a half, but not quite. So I could even just think about this as 2 times a half to get an estimate. So the answer is going to be somewhere around 1 is my guess. Okay, it's not going to be exactly 1, but it's definitely going to be smaller than 2 25 hundredths because we're multiplying by something less than 1. So that's my first thing. That's my estimate. Okay, and now what I want you to do is think about what we did in the last video where I said the first step I wanted you to do when solving decimal multiplication problems is to think about them as whole numbers first because we're comfortable with whole numbers. And then we can use what we know about multiplication to change it. Okay, so I changed this into whole numbers and I made it into 225 times 32. And we're going to solve it using an array. And I've already set up the array. Parents, if you're watching, the reason we're using an array is because this is a strategy that transfers really nicely for decimals, fractions, whole numbers, and also later in algebra. And it's a conceptual model that hopefully your child is starting to understand and make sense of. In class, we build them using these place value tools where we have these mats, and it actually represents different parts of the place value system to really help kids see what the numbers are doing when they're multiplying. Okay, I don't have those with me, so we're just going to do a quick sketch of an array. So 225 times 32. If I had a yard that was 225 feet times 32 feet, it might look something like this. And the nice thing about an array is I don't have to solve all of the parts at a time. I can solve each part separately. So what I did is I took this dimension, and it was supposed to be 225, and I broke it by place value into a 200, drew a line down, 20, drew a line down, and 5. So each section has its own dimension. And then here I broke the 32 into a 30 and a 2 and drew a line that way. So now if I'm thinking about this as like my backyard or something, I can solve each part. So the area of this inside section would be 200 times 30, which would be 6,000. Okay. The area of this section would be 20 times 30, which would equal 600. The area of this section would be 5 times 30, which would equal 150. Okay, so now I know the area of this whole part of my yard. I did it in chunks. Okay, could also do it down here. Now, you could use the standard algorithm to do this as well. Okay, here I'm going to do 200 times this dimension, which is 2, equals 400. This has a dimension of 20 going across by 2. And that's going to be 40. And this little tiny section of my yard has dimensions of 2 times 5, and that is going to get us 10. So now if I add all these parts up together, I can get my total answer. So this top part is 6,750. I'm going to add it up off to the side. 6,750 plus 440 plus 450, and I can get the answer. Let's see, 10, 11, 12. Okay, so the area, if I'm multiplying by the whole numbers, is going to be 7,200. Okay, so 225 times 32 is 7,200. Now, I have to adjust. And if you watch my last video for this week, we talked about how in multiplication, if we divide one factor by a number, we do the exact same thing to the answer, the product. Okay, so here I can see that the 225 stayed the same, and this factor divided by 100, which means that we're going to start by dividing 7,200 by 100. So it's going to shift over 2 places to the right on the place value chart. So that means it's going to become 72. Okay, so everything shifted over 2 places. Now the 3,200th stayed the same, but the 225 was divided by 100 to get to 2 and 2,500ths. So that means I also have to divide this by 100 again, and when I do that, I will get 72 hundredths. I could put the zeros on the end, or